It says here, Kara, to tell us which side you're actually on, but I'm not sure even you know.
I don't, because every day it's different. I mean, I read a great thread from Cory Doctorow outlining exactly what these companies were doing in terms of digital advertising. And then, of course, there's Murdoch. And you saw a picture one of the former prime ministers showed of 8 exact headlines across Australia. So it's essentially, you know, sort of a news mogul who has a history of doing things like this, of pushing people around, and then you have a tech company whose control over the digital ad market is supreme, both of the two, Google and Facebook, and so it's not a great choice. So I think, but this law doesn't do that. This arbitration process, in order to establish some sort of parity, doesn't do that. I think there has to be things like privacy bills, taxes that then you would use for journalism, social media taxes, digital advertising taxes, and breakup, of course, is sort of the last case scenario. So there's all kinds of levers, and this one is trying to get to something good, but doesn't seem to reach it at all.
Right. I wonder, as this whole thing evolves, Kara, as we maybe turn our attention more to Canada, as we see what maybe France wants to do, is this going to get too complex, or do you see sides sort of backing a single idea, whether it's Australia's or not?
Well, better. I would think better. I mean, a lot of people have issues with GDPR in Europe, which is the way they have done various issues around tech. I think it'll probably be better, and I hope legislators in Canada and elsewhere will be a little less prone to having to. One of the things that drove me crazy, and I think I wrote about this, is none of this says there more journalism is going to be done, which I think is the point, right? This whole idea that journalism is over because of these giant tech companies. But there's nothing saying this money has to go to hiring more journalists or creating more media or whatever. And that's one of the issues, is it could go right into the pockets of these news moguls and then right out to shareholders. And so that's one of the other things to consider. So it's extraordinarily complex here, and not just if Facebook is a monopoly kind of situation here, although, you know, it's easy to embrace that because they are in many ways. And I think they handed Rupert Murdoch, who owns News Corp and controls most of the Australian media for all intents and purposes, a real PR win here.
Yeah, Kara, certainly a very complex issue.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Sorry, hon.
No, Carl, please go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. No, you go
Kara,
ahead.
Kara, I know one day we're going to exit this world of 1-second delays. My question, Kara, was when you look at players other than Murdoch and heads of state, whether it's Microsoft, I mean, is there one that you find particularly interesting right now, or that you think could be pivotal in the months and years ahead?
There's some very interesting voices in Australia. I think in Canada, some of the stuff that their ministers are talking about is somewhat interesting. Obviously, there's been some movement here in this country. It's mostly around antitrust and privacy bills and things like that. And so there's got to be some way to get transparency into this market that's dominated by Facebook and Google, and how they run things. There's been lots of examples of them not being as honest as they need to be around how pricing is done, and their control of it is absolute. And so I think that's a laudable task, is to try to figure out how to make it clear what's happening here and separate their interests from one another that help each other. Search leads into advertising and things like that. And so, yeah, there's lots of solutions, but they've got to get down, and really it's complex, obviously.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.